They can't win legitimately, so they always try to change the rules at the last minute.
63 days ago, Chuck Schumer led a coup to overthrow Joe Biden, and he's telling me or any other Republican what we should be doing.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America, welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. How far are people in power willing to go to secure the presidency in 2024? It seems to be a through line, a theme throughout this particular election cycle, which, by the way, I remind you, is the most consequential election cycle of your lifetime since the last most consequential election cycle of your lifetime. I don't even remember what that was. Was it 2022? Was it 2020? I don't know.
Well, who can keep track, right?
But we do know half of an answer to the question I pose, and that comes from Democrats. Democrats were willing to throw Joe Biden under a bus. His feeble mind and feeble body was too much of an anchor on their ticket throughout the country. He was not going to win against the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. So what do? They take the Democratic nominee that was duly elected, that earned all of the delegates at their convention, threw him aside and replaced him with an installed designee, Kamala Harris. We've talked about it many times on the show. So that's half the answer. So the next question is, what are Republicans willing to do to secure the presidency in 2024? Well, if you look at what's going on in Nebraska, and particularly what Lindsey Graham, of all people, the South Carolina senator, is trying to do in Nebraska, then you'll see the answer to that question. Republicans may be willing to change the rules about how the electoral votes in Nebraska are allocated that may actually close off a path to victory for Kamala Harris. And it may come down to one Republican, a Democrat turned Republican in Nebraska. People like to talk about how one vote doesn't matter. Well, I'm just going to show you right now in this video how one vote can change everything nationally. But before I do all that, I'm going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you're seeing here in this or any other video on the channel, please smash that thumbs up button. Like, comment, share the show with your friends. All that really, really good stuff. Because all that's going to help grow the show via the YouTube algorithm. As always, gang, thank you guys so much for all that you do to help grow the channel. You know I appreciate all of your efforts, whether it's liking and sharing videos, subscribing to the channel, or going to shop.buffoonoftheweek.com. There's a whole bunch of new merch that was just uploaded, including an ebook version of my book and a whole bunch of apparel and merch centered around our new weekly show, Behind Enemy Lines. Go check that out at shop.buffoonoftheweek.com. All right, we got the grifting out of the way, so let's get down to the heart of the matter here. To understand what's going on in Nebraska, which by no means is a swing state or anything like that, we have to do a little bit of a deep dive. We got to get a little wonky and look at how the Nebraska state legislature has allocated the method and means by which electoral votes are awarded to candidates.
We are actually going to talk about Nebraska for a minute. I know we never talk about Nebraska, but stay with us here because Senator Lindsey Graham, you see behind me, and a number of other Republicans are actually making a last-minute pitch for the state to change the way it allocates its electoral votes. They're hoping, I suppose, to deny Kamala Harris from winning one electoral vote, one vote. Now, here's the way Nebraska does it. They have 5 electoral votes to the state overall. Statewide winner gets 2. Then there's 1 each if you win one of all of their 3 congressional districts.
Hey, run that by me again.
As you guys know, most states in the country, they do a winner take all. So basically, if you win statewide, you win the popular vote, you get all of the electoral votes, regardless of whether or not a congressional district here or there may have voted for the person who didn't get the majority of the votes. Nebraska does it differently. They award 2 electoral votes if you're the statewide winner, and then there are 3 congressional districts. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district is centered around the city of Omaha. It's their largest city. Democrats typically win the popular vote in that district, the 2nd congressional district, which gives them one electoral vote. And typically Republicans will win the other 2 congressional districts and the statewide, giving them 4.
Everybody got that?
What Lindsey Graham is trying to do is convert this unusual allocation into a winner-take-all by encouraging the state legislature in Nebraska, with the assistance of the entire federal delegation from Nebraska, which is all Republicans, by the way, and convince them to change the law in an emergency session so that all 5 electoral votes go to the winner of the statewide election.
That's how you get to 5. Now, on the map, the DDHQ presidential forecast map, we can explain why that might matter in a really big way. Imagine this scenario. It's not hard to imagine. Donald Trump wins the Sun Belt, and Kamala Harris rebuilds and keeps the blue wall. So that means of the 7 swing states, we'd say North Carolina is red, and so is Georgia. See, we're counting up, and Trump's at 251. Arizona, 11. Nevada, 6. Okay? Look where Trump is, 268, too shy of the 270 needed to win. Now, if Harris does, as I said, and rebuilds the so-called blue wall and keeps Wisconsin, Michigan with its 15 electoral votes, and Pennsylvania with 19 blue, there it is, as close as can be, Harris victory, 270 to 268. Now look at Nebraska with the blue lines through it for that scenario that I just played out. So what if Nebraska 2, as it's called, where Omaha is, one of the congressional districts, instead of being blue, that's what the lines mean, went red, and all of Nebraska was red, all 5. Oh, come on. 269, tie game. You go to the House of Representatives.
And that's when shit gets really crazy.
Remember who holds the slimmest of majorities in the House? Oh, yeah, it's the Republicans. So this is an insurance policy, in my opinion, that Lindsey Graham is trying to push and get Nebraska to go along with in order to deal with the possibility, the very real possibility, that we could be deadlocked at the Electoral College and then go to the House, where Trump would then be elected the president. Over the weekend, NBC News' Kristen Welker on Meet the Press challenged Lindsey Graham about these machinations happening in Nebraska that he seems to be taking point on. Let's go to the interview.
All right, let's move on to some of your activity this week. You traveled to Nebraska, one of only 2 states that awards its electoral votes by congressional district instead of winner take all. Right. That, as you know, could be decisive in this election. It awarded Joe Biden, for example, 1 electoral vote in the Omaha area back in 2020. You met with state lawmakers to persuade them to change to a winner-take-all system. Right. Here's what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say about this trip earlier this week.
Look, they're very worried about the election, as they should be. The American people every day see the contrast. They can't win legitimately, so they always try to change the rules at the last minute.
Senator, you've seen the results of our poll. Can Donald Trump win if you don't change the rules in Nebraska?
This is really, number one, 65% of the people in your polls say the country's on the wrong track. Who's best able to solve the crime problem? Trump by 6. Who's best on the economy? Trump by 9. Inflation, Trump by 8. Border, Trump by 21.
Lindsey Graham's not answering the question, and he's not answering the challenge that Chuck Schumer seemingly made earlier in the week. Is this changing the rules? Let's make that the topic of the day. Let me know what you think about this idea of changing the allocation of the electoral votes within the state of Nebraska for a political advantage. I want to know what you guys say in the comments.
So what did I get out of this poll? On the things that matter most to the American people, Trump is winning decisively. In a head-to-head, he is not. Now I know why the Teamsters voted the way they did. The Teamsters have endorsed every Democratic candidate for president for the last 30 years except Harris. They must believe, like the American people, she is not good on the issues that matter most to the Teamsters. That's the only explanation, is that she lost the endorsement of the Teamsters for the first time in 30 years. Why? Because she's bad on the issues they care about.
He didn't answer the question. I call Democrats on this all the time. I'm calling Lindsey Graham on this as well. The question was about what's the deal with Nebraska? And he goes off on numbers about Kamala Harris being unpopular, yet she's still in it. It's neck and neck right now. So, what do you need the rule change? If you have all these numbers in your favor, Lindsey Graham, why do you need a rule change about the allocation of electoral votes in Nebraska? Doesn't seem to follow here. What's the deal?
Given what you're saying, though, if she's not good on these issues, why do you need to change the rules in Nebraska?
I think Nebraska has been talking about this for years. It is a very close election. 63 days ago, Chuck Schumer led a coup to overthrow Joe Biden, and he's telling me or any other Republican what we should be doing.
You're not better than me.
This is a good point. It still doesn't answer the question, but Lindsey Graham is saying that Democrats don't have the moral high ground on this issue. They just did a whole bunch of their own machinations in order to throw Joe Biden under the bus and install Kamala Harris. So how dare they tell Republicans, well, you can't change the way things are done in a state that Republicans control at this late stage?
How dare you?
There's another state that handles things like this. Maine, they allocate electoral votes in a different way. They split it up. And they didn't change the rules. And in fact, by the way, they can't change the rules at this point without a 2/3 majority of both of their state legislature houses. Republicans have been waiting to see what would happen in Maine, presumably, to decide whether or not to try this gambit in Nebraska. And clearly, Democrats are hot under the collar about it.
Lick my balls, Jimmy. You're just mad because I thought of it first.
There are no heroes in this story, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. This is all political brinksmanship going on in real time.
If they change the law in Nebraska, it won't be on the phone in the middle of the night. It will be through a democratic process. The entire federal delegation of Nebraska, House members and 2 senators, want this change. To my friends in Nebraska, that one electoral vote could be the difference between Harris being president or not, and she's a disaster for Nebraska and the world.
I hear you calling it a coup. Of course, Democrats have the right to change who's at the top
so
of their
does,
ticket.
so does
Very
Nebraska.
quickly.
All right, Kristen Welker's comments notwithstanding, you recognize that this is a political maneuver. So what's the deal? If the Nebraska legislature can do this, it'll have to be in an emergency session, of course, but if they do this, it may change the complexion of the race. National politics is 50 different state elections. That's what we're looking at here for this presidential election. Every state governs how their elections are administered and how their electoral college votes are administered. This could be a potential game changer. And it may come down to one holdout Nebraska legislator that we're going to talk about after the break. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So we have all of this intrigue and machinations at the federal level, the national level. We see it with the installation of Kamala Harris as the Democrat designee. We see it now with Lindsey Graham trying to maneuver and massage the rules in Nebraska with the assistance of the entire federal delegation from Nebraska. And at the center of it all is one Republican state senator who holds the fate of this issue in the palm of his hands. From the New York Times, how one man's vote in Nebraska could change the presidential election. Let's get to the story right now. In eastern Nebraska, far from the presidential battleground states, a drama is playing out that could, in a perfectly plausible November scenario, have history-altering repercussions for the nation's future and the next president. And it may all come down to one man. Hollywood couldn't write a better script, right? A little melodramatic here from the New York Times, but they're certainly sounding the alarm bell for their readership about what's going on in this predominantly Republican state. A single Republican state senator from Omaha named Mike McDonnell has so far stood firm against a push by former President Donald Trump, national Republicans, and the Nebraska GOP to change Nebraska from a state that divides its electoral votes that we've been talking about to a winner-take-all system. If Mr. McDonnell buckles, 2 other Republican senators in Nebraska's unicameral legislature, so they have one house there, who have also not yet committed to changing Nebraska's system, are likely to follow his lead, according to a number of Republicans and Democrats involved in the discussions going on in Nebraska.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
The tumbling dominoes would almost certainly give the single electoral vote of Omaha and its suburbs, that's the 2nd Congressional District, which Vice President Kamala Harris is favored to win, to Donald Trump.
Dun, dun, dun.
As of Friday last week, Mr. McDonald, who is barred from Nebraska's term limits law from seeking re-election, so he's got nothing to lose at this point, has not changed his position. He is still a no vote for changing Nebraska's electoral allocation. Senator McDonald has heard a lot of compelling arguments for and against, but as of right now still remains a no vote, his spokesman Barry Rubin said on Friday. The only way he would think about switching, this is interesting, would be if someone gave him a compelling reason for why it made sense on the merits of the winner-take-all situation.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Now, I want to just, there's Mr. McDonald right there. This is where it gets even more interesting here. In some sense, the Democrats share the blame for the conundrum. Mr. McDonald, a firefighter by trade and a union leader, had once been a firm blue-collar Democrat, but his Catholic faith and social conservatism led him to support Republican bills that restricted most abortions, as well as transition-related care for transgender minors. These issues that Democrats have been touting nationally as reasons why to vote for Kamala Harris bit them in the ass in Nebraska.
Oh, the delicious irony of it all.
The Nebraska Democratic Party punished him in March with a censure. Then in April, McDonald switched parties and changed the balance of power in Lincoln, in the state house in Nebraska, where Democrats had been able to use the legislature's filibuster rule effectively. He broke the filibuster in Nebraska. Now he's the man in the middle, and with less than 7 weeks until Election Day, the pressure will no doubt be excruciating, especially when you have people like Lindsey Graham and the entire federal delegation of Nebraska and the Nebraska GOP, the party that he just chose to join, breathing down his neck on this issue. I don't want to be in agenda gymnastics here and root for one side or the other. Frankly, what the Democrats did was pretty abhorrent, and what Lindsey Graham is trying to do in influencing and, well, I'll say it, interfering in the affairs of Nebraska, both sides feel very shady to me. That said, if the federal delegation from Nebraska, who are all elected by the people in Nebraska, are pushing for this change and want to interface with their own state legislature, cool, I'm all about that. And if that state legislature wants to take up this issue in an emergency session and vote to become winner take all, and it's done legally, I am all about it. Let them do it. I don't like this national political pressure coming to bear basically on one person here, a person who seems to be committed to their personal values. They left the Democrat Party to go to the Republican based upon the far left nature that Democrats have taken nationally on issues like abortion and transgender issues. So they basically left him out of their party, compelled him to go to the right, but now the right is trying to compel him to vote a certain way to fundamentally alter the face of this election. It's not an enviable position to be in, and unfortunately, this is the brinksmanship of politics.
Either way, you're fucked.
But never let it be said that one vote can't make a difference. Let this be a lesson to everybody out there. One vote in this election can actually change the complexion of a national race, the most consequential national race in our lifetime. That's pretty freaking cool for a wonk like me, and I'm all about watching this situation to see how it unfolds. But that's my opinion here. I want to know what you guys think about all of this. Let's talk about it together in the comments. And as always, like and share the show with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the shows. How do you think this is going to play out? Do you think this guy McDonald is going to succumb to the pressure? Do you think that Republicans are actually going to follow up on this? Do they have the balls to do it? And what do you think about the Democrats calling hypocrisy on Republicans? Let me know in the comments what you think. Let's talk about this and all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.